There is a quiet exhaustion that follows most people through their lives. Not the kind that comes from work or effort, but the kind that comes from trying to be someone you're not. From an early age, you learn the rules without anyone ever explaining them. Be impressive, but not strange. Be confident, but not too bold. Care deeply, but only about the right things. And slowly, almost without noticing, your attention drifts away from yourself toward approval, recognition, validation. You begin to measure your worth in reactions, in compliments, in silence, in the invisible judgment you imagine sitting behind every pair of eyes. Most people don't realize how much of their anxiety comes from this habit alone. The habit of caring about things that were never truly theirs to carry. You replay conversations long after they end. You hesitate before speaking, rewriting your thoughts internally. You soften your edges so others feel comfortable, even when it costs you your honesty. And the strange part is this: the more you care, the heavier life becomes. Not because caring is wrong, but because misplaced caring drains the soul. Centuries ago, a philosopher quietly observed something most people still struggle to accept today. Much of our suffering does not come from reality itself, but from how tightly we cling to it. We try to control how we are seen. We try to manage outcomes before they exist. We try to perfect ourselves for an audience that is too busy worrying about itself to truly notice. And in doing so, we lose something essential: ease, presence, freedom. You can feel this loss in your body. The tension in your shoulders when you think about expectations, the shallow breath you take before expressing an opinion, the invisible pressure to perform even in moments meant for rest. Life becomes a stage, and you forget what it feels like to step off it. But here is the paradox most people miss. The moment you stop caring about what does not matter, life begins to rearrange itself. Not because you gave up, not because you became indifferent, but because your energy finally returned to its rightful place. When you stop obsessing over being perfect, you begin to move naturally. When you stop seeking approval, your words carry more weight. When you stop fearing judgment, your actions become clearer. Think about the people who feel most grounded in your life. They are not the loudest. They are not constantly explaining themselves. They are not trying to convince you of their value. They are at ease. And ease is magnetic. There is a confidence that comes not from effort, but from release, from understanding that you do not need to prove your existence. The world will misunderstand you sometimes. It always has. It always will. And strangely enough, that is not a problem. Because when you stop trying to be understood by everyone, you finally understand yourself. Most people live as if every moment is a test, as if one mistake could define them, as if every opinion holds authority. But life does not work that way. You are allowed to be unfinished. You are allowed to change. You are allowed to be inconsistent while you grow. Perfection is not wisdom. Acceptance is. The desire to control everything comes from fear. Fear of loss, fear of rejection, fear of uncertainty. But uncertainty is not an enemy. It is the natural state of life. Trying to eliminate it is like trying to still the ocean with your hands. The mind resists this truth. It prefers the illusion of control, even when that illusion causes suffering. So it worries, it plans, it overthinks, and in doing so it forgets how to live. Imagine what would happen if you loosened your grip, just slightly. If you allowed yourself to speak without rehearsing, to act without overanalyzing, to exist without constant self monitoring. Not recklessly, not carelessly, but honestly. There is a difference between not caring and not being enslaved by care. One is emptiness, the other is clarity. When you stop caring about the wrong things, you begin to care deeply about the right ones. Your values, your integrity, your inner peace. You begin to notice how many of your worries were inherited, not chosen. How many expectations were absorbed without question. How much energy was spent maintaining an image instead of building a life. And slowly, something shifts. Your decisions become simpler. Your reactions soften. Your mind grows quieter. Not because problems disappear, but because they no longer dominate you. This is the beginning of freedom. Not freedom from responsibility, but freedom from unnecessary weight. And here is the most important realization of all. Life does not open up when you chase it. It opens up when you stop forcing it. Opportunities appear when you stop begging for validation. Connections deepen when you stop needing reassurance. Confidence grows when you stop measuring yourself against everyone else. The less you cling, the more you receive. This is not philosophy meant for bookshelves. It is philosophy meant for living. And this is only the beginning. Because once you loosen your grip on external approval, you begin to uncover something far more powerful than confidence. You begin to uncover self-trust. And in the next session, we will explore what happens when you stop trying to control outcomes and allow life to meet you halfway. Before moving forward, take a moment. If this perspective resonates with you, if you've ever felt the weight of caring too much about things that drain you, take a second to like the video. It helps this message reach the people who need it most. There comes a moment when you begin to notice something unsettling. Not outside of you, but within. You realize that much of what you call effort is actually resistance. Resistance to uncertainty. Resistance to not knowing. Resistance to outcomes you cannot control. Most people believe control is strength, but in truth, the constant need to control is a form of fear. You plan endlessly. You rehearse possibilities. You prepare for scenarios that may never arrive. And while preparation has its place, obsession does not. Because life does not respond well to clenched fists. The more tightly you try to force certainty, the more chaotic everything feels. This is where detachment enters, not as withdrawal, but as wisdom. Detachment does not mean you stop caring about your life. It means you stop trying to own every result. There is a subtle but profound difference. When you are attached to outcomes, every delay feels like failure. Every obstacle feels personal. Every deviation feels like betrayal. But when you are detached, you still act, just without desperation. You do your best. Then, you let go. And this changes everything. Think about how much emotional energy you lose fighting reality, arguing with what has already happened, resenting what you cannot undo, fearing what you cannot predict. None of this gives you power. It only steals your presence. The philosopher who understood this deeply observed something most people miss. Life unfolds whether you cooperate or not. So the question is not whether uncertainty exists, but whether you choose to suffer because of it. When you stop demanding guarantees from life, you gain flexibility. When you stop insisting on perfect timing, you gain momentum. When you stop fearing mistakes, you gain experience. Detachment creates space, and space invites clarity. This is why some people move forward calmly while others panic under pressure. It is not that they know more, it is that they expect less from the future and more from themselves. They understand something essential. You cannot control what happens, but you can control how deeply you let it disturb you. And that is real power. Notice how attachment shapes relationships. When you need someone to behave a certain way for you to feel okay, you are no longer connecting. You are controlling. Expectation breeds resentment. Neediness breeds anxiety. Fear of loss breeds tension. But detachment changes the dynamic. When you allow people to be who they are without trying to manage them, relationships become lighter, more honest, more real. You listen instead of anticipating. You respond instead of reacting. You appreciate instead of grasping. And ironically, this makes connection deeper because people feel safe around those who do not need to possess them. The same principle applies to success. The people who burn out are often the ones who tie their self-worth to results. Every failure feels like identity collapse. Every delay feels like inadequacy. But those who endure understand something quieter. Failure is information, not judgment. When you detach from ego, you learn faster. When you detach from outcomes, you recover quicker. When you detach from comparison, you move at your own pace. And your pace is the only one that matters. Detachment allows you to see life clearly, without distortion, without catastrophizing, without over identifying, without unnecessary drama. It doesn't make you passive, it makes you precise. You choose your battles, you conserve your energy, you stop bleeding attention on things that do not grow you. Most anxiety is not caused by danger, but by imagination misused, by trying to live in futures that do not exist yet. Detachment brings you back to now, to what you can do, to what you can influence, to what is real. And once you are rooted in the present, you begin to trust yourself again. Not because life is predictable, but because you are resilient. This is the hidden gift of letting go. You stop asking, what if everything goes wrong? And start asking, even if it does, can I handle it? And the answer, more often than not, is yes. When you stop clinging, you stop fearing loss. When you stop fearing loss, you stop shrinking. When you stop shrinking, life meets you with opportunity. Detachment does not remove emotion, it refines it. You still care, you still feel, but you no longer drown. You experience disappointment without collapse. You experience uncertainty without paralysis. You experience success without ego inflation. Balance emerges. And with balance comes quiet confidence. This is not a mindset taught loudly. It cannot be marketed easily. It cannot be forced. It is learned through reflection and practiced through restraint. And once it settles into you, it becomes unmistakable. You speak slower, you decide cleaner, you react less. Not because you don't care, but because you finally care about the right things. And now, as you begin to feel this shift, one final question remains. What happens when detachment becomes not just a tool, but a way of being? That is where the deepest transformation occurs. And that is what we will explore in the final session. If this journey is helping you see life more clearly, subscribe to the channel, The Quiet Paradox. There is a quiet turning point that arrives. Once detachment stops being something you practice and starts becoming something you embody. At first, letting go feels intentional. You remind yourself not to overreact, not to cling, not to chase. But over time, something deeper happens. You no longer have to remind yourself. Your nervous system learns safety. Your mind learns patience. Your identity loosens its grip on outcomes. You stop living in defense mode. And this is where real transformation begins. Most people think peace comes from having answers, from certainty, from control. But peace actually comes from being okay without those things. When you no longer need life to behave a certain way for you to feel whole, you become unshakable. Not because nothing goes wrong, but because nothing owns you anymore. Criticism loses its sting. Failure loses its drama. Uncertainty loses its threat. You experience events as experiences, not verdicts on your worth. This is the final layer of detachment, identity level freedom. You stop defining yourself by success. You stop condemning yourself for mistakes. You stop narrating your life as a story of lack or delay. You simply live it. And in doing so, you discover something profound. Life responds differently to those who are no longer desperate. When you stop needing validation, people sense stability. When you stop chasing approval, respect appears. When you stop forcing outcomes, opportunities surface. Not magically, but naturally, because desperation repels, while grounded presence attracts. Think about how much of your emotional energy was once spent bracing for rejection, bracing for disappointment, bracing for judgment. Detachment removes the armor, and without armor, you move faster. You breathe deeper. You connect more honestly. This is why detachment does not isolate you. It refines your relationships. You no longer attach to people to fill emptiness. You choose them to share fullness. You no longer fear being alone because you have learned to sit with yourself without panic. Loneliness fades when self-abandonment ends, and when you are no longer afraid of solitude, you stop tolerating what drains you. You say no without guilt. You walk away without drama. You wait without anxiety. Your boundaries become calm, not rigid. And this calmness is power. The same applies to purpose. When you detach from timelines, you stop rushing growth. When you detach from comparison, you stop doubting progress. When you detach from outcome obsession, you stop burning out. You still work. You still strive. But now your effort is clean, not driven by fear, but by alignment. This is when life starts to feel meaningful again. Not louder, not easier, but truer. You stop asking, am I doing enough? And start asking, is this honest to who I am? That single shift rewrites everything. Detachment teaches you that meaning is not found in approval, but in coherence. When your actions align with your values, when your words align with your truth, when your pace aligns with your capacity, you are no longer scattered. You are centered. And from that center, you move with quiet authority. This is why those who practice detachment often seem calm in chaos. Why they don't rush to defend themselves. Why they don't over-explain. They are not numb. They are rooted. They understand that life is not something to conquer, but something to cooperate with. They accept impermanence instead of fighting it. They accept uncertainty instead of fearing it. They accept themselves instead of editing endlessly. And in that acceptance, they gain freedom. Not the freedom to avoid pain, but the freedom to face it without losing themselves. This is the ultimate realization. You do not need to care less about life. You need to care less about what life uses to distract you. You do not need to harden. You need to release. You do not need control. You need trust. Trust that you can respond. Trust that you can adapt. Trust that you can endure. Once this trust is built, fear loses its authority. And when fear loses authority, life opens. Not all at once, not dramatically, but steadily, quietly, in alignment. You stop asking life to prove itself to you, and you begin to meet it as it is. And strangely, beautifully, that is when everything starts falling into place. Not because you stopped caring, but because you finally stopped caring about the wrong things. If this perspective shifted something inside you, if it made you pause, reflect, or see yourself more clearly, comment your thoughts below. Your insight might be exactly what someone else needs to read.